Right. Today on the podcast, we're back in Arizona with someone who I don't know if you call it two careers, if you completely abandon running and come back to it later. I don't know if it's one career or two, but we'll talk about all that with somebody who's having a great run in the midst of a very competitive career again now. But we're going to go all the way back with welcome today on the podcast, Brent Cushenbery. Hi, Brent.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Brent, let's talk about your origin story, where you grew up, and what was your beginning life getting involved in competitive sports and running?
Okay. In terms of competitive sports, from the time I could walk, my parents were championship water skiers, slalom, tricks, and jumpers. I competed in water skiing, but in terms of running, that started as soon as I hit high school. I went to a new high school out in the country in the middle of nowhere in Rescue, California. I didn't even know what cross country was, but I missed football practice. Of course, I was all of probably 103 pounds. I wasn't there in the summers because I missed football. I saw this posting for cross country. And the next day, the coach pointed down this road and said, run to the end of this road and back. And that was 3 miles out and 3 miles back in Converse high top tennis shoes. That was the start. So that was at age 13.
What year was that?
Let's see, that would have been 73. Yeah.
Okay.
Before
Did you know anything about the sport of running? And I mean, we just had the 72 Olympics. Were you paying any attention to that stuff?
A little bit. We all knew of Frank Shorter and that era. Of course, Prefontaine was in that era as well. It was right before, in fact, I'm laughing because you have Nike waffles behind you as a backdrop. And I remember the shoes in those days were, we raced in Onitsuga Tigers, which were, you could get them for, and then there was something out of Korea called Koyo Bears you could get for $5 a pair. And that's what we raced in. So that's where I got started cross country and track, and I got the bug like everyone else. And
let me find out a little bit how that went. 13 years old, you run down the road, you join the team. Where were you in terms of achievement and being competitive, having been a competitive athlete? How did that all fit in, and what would develop with your cross country there in your first school?
Okay, I won some races. We had a very deep high school league I was in terms of distance runners, but I was always in the upper portion of races. Definitely we were that high mileage generation. I had 3 close friends in high school that we trained very hard, and I knew all of the local runners in Northern California, at least the ones in the Central Valley, not so much Barrie. I knew of them by name. And in those days, we didn't have a state meet cross country. You went as far as your sectional, and that was it. I got really into road racing. In addition, in fact, I would often race on Saturday, turn right around and race on Sunday the very next day.
One thing I want to check, at some point you were the top 17-year-old at the 20-mile distance. That's a long racing. And just want to go back, when the coach said run 6 miles, were you?
Yeah.
How was that?
Interestingly enough, I was pretty small and pretty wiry and always outside doing things and fairly athletic. I remember I got about 2 miles down the road and I was right behind this senior, the best runner on our team's shoulder. I remember he elbowed me and said, "What are you doing up here, freshman?" And because I wasn't supposed to be running with the senior. Of course, I was hanging on for dear life and he was just cruising. I'll never forget that moment because it pissed me off. He was telling me I couldn't run with him. And I thought, I'm going to show you, I'm going to run with you. I did not in terms of competition with him because he was much older and had a few years on me, but that actually lit the fire. In terms of the 20-mile road race, in those days, there was 2 of them, one on the West Coast and one on the East Coast. As you probably know, it was before USATF and it was the U, the Amateur Athletic Union. Unbeknownst to me, actually a friend told me after I set the American record, I didn't even realize it, but he saw it publicized and said, "Hey, Brent, you got the American record for age group 17 for 20 miles. And so part of it is there's only 2 20-mile races in the whole US. But another part of it is I put on a ton of miles at a very early age. So running 6-minute pace for 20 miles was nothing. We did some really odd things in those days. We knew the Kenyans and Africans were pretty good, so we would actually run on pavement with bare feet and did all kinds of stuff. Just grew up in a little bitty town with rolling hills and no traffic on the roads. So you could run down the middle of the road for hours on end and never see a car.
Yeah. Yeah, Ruth Wysocki, training on the track, she used to run bare feet on the grass on the inside of the track. There's a lot of people doing interesting innovations there. What about your training, your coach, and that mileage? Did you log this, or do you remember what was the mileage by the time you were senior, and how was your coach handling your progress and the team's goals?
Well, I've been fortunate in having a number of good coaches, high school, college, and beyond. After that first freshman year I was telling you about, during that year, I was probably doing anywhere from 5 to 10 or 12 miles a day. But that summer, after my freshman year, he had a goal for us to do. You could get a little patch if you were part of the 1,000-mile club. So that summer, I set off to do 1,000 miles. My routine was pretty simple. Every morning I'd get up at 5:30, run. It was about 10 miles. I'd get back, have a peanut butter on toast sandwich and a big glass of chocolate milk, and then I'd take a nap for 2 hours. And then I'd get up and garden and maybe do a second run in the evening. So I went into my sophomore year very strong. And in terms of I had the base. And from then on, it stayed the same. Our coach, he managed our mileage at school, but myself and about 3 of my other high school buddies were so into it, we went way beyond anything the coach had asked any of us to do. And like I said, we were all road racers, and we did all-comers meets, did a lot of marathons, because in those years, that was the thing, everyone. It was Frank Shorter, it was Bill Rogers, all of that. So,
well, what about track? The longest distance then, 2 miles on the track. What was your team racing in? Did you ever relay? It sounded like you had several good kind of comparable runners.
My specialty was the 2 mile. I did run 4:26 in high school, which is not blazing at all. But because we had other milers, actually, I only ran the mile if I was going to pick up points. And sometimes I'd run the 800. And sometimes the coach would have us all run a leg of a mile relay to pick up more points. So it was all about scoring points. And as distance runners, put me in, coach. What do you want me to run? And I'll run it.
And do you remember a limit? Was it if you ran the 2 mile, could you run other events? When I was growing up in Pennsylvania, the first year, if you ran the 2 mile, it's all you could run. Later, they opened it up.
Oh, no, we could run as many events as you wanted to run. So we often doubled. Like for me, I often did the mile and 2. In fact, it was rare that I did one race. And quite often I would even triple. Those were single day. We never had multiple day track meets. It was a single day. And occasionally I'd quadruple, do the 2 mile, 800 and mile relay, or a distance medley. Distance medleys were actually pretty common in those days. And we had a nice spread of distance runners. I would most often run the mile on a distance medley or 3/4 of a mile on a distance medley team.
That reminds me of a line. I don't know if it's real. I think it was from Once a Runner that Frank Shorter, somebody said to him, "How'd you know I ran 4:30 in high school?" And he said, "Everybody ran 4:30.
Yeah, I hear that. God, if I could do that now, boy, wow.
Yeah. Do you have reflections on, from getting that elbow and getting motivated, how your self-image came to be? I am a runner, and then finding out you set a national record. How did that evolve over time for you to think this was going to be something you were going to be doing even after high school?
I think I was always a kind of a goal-oriented person. So at first it was, I want to run my first marathon. And then it was, I want to run a faster marathon. And then it was try to qualify for the Olympic trials in the marathon. Later in life, it was ultras in my 40s. And of course, now coming back to the steeplechase, which was, I knew it in college because that was where I was placed. And I did okay at UC Santa Barbara. And not our best steeplechaser, but what would I would have been, number 4 or 5 on the steeplechase depth roster. But sadly, even in those days, I was still torn by, I kept getting drawn back to the road and didn't actually even use my 4th year of eligibility in college. I was done with school and I got married and went on, but kept competing. But to get back to your question, how that's evolved, partly it's having the coaches, particularly 2 in my life that were really foundational. My high school coach, Mr. Brusian, Steve Brusian, no longer with us, but very good coach. And then a superb coach in junior college, a fellow by the name of Al Beta, who is a 2-time Olympic coach. Olympic.
Yeah.
So he's just a coach. In fact, he's still alive and today at 92. He doesn't look a day older than when he was my coach in college. But he's the kind of person that's super, super inspirational. He knew everyone's name on the team, whether you were the top runner or the 30th runner or just a walk-on runner that was just working out the team. And Coach Beta really instilled a different love of competition and what it is to be a man and all of that.
With your extensive experience on the road by the time you get to college and many track races, what about your approach? Were you a front runner or a kicker? How did you approach races and strategy? When you're running 4 races, you don't have that much time to figure out what's in between and who's in them.
I can tell you all of my PRs, regardless of the race, were always negative splits. So for me, I've always been a kind of, I don't know if it's call it a finesse runner or I'm generally, I wouldn't say I was a good kicker. I'm a good closer. So I close from a long ways out. And that's always been a strength of mine. And it seems to me, my best races have always been under the hardest conditions. If it's too hot, if it's raining, windy, if it's really difficult, I tend to separate myself more from those that would normally be around me. I don't know. I think some of that has to do with just growing up in a very small town in the country where the nearest store is 30 miles away and bicycling 5 or 6 miles on a hilly back country roads is a normal thing. And yeah.
I want to ask you one more thing about that. So it's a small town, but it sounds like you had a substantial team in high school. What was the status of the sport? You missed football, so you went out for another sport. Where was cross country and track in terms of the school identity in there?
Well, interesting enough, our cross country and track coach was an English teacher, and he was a tyrant on cleanliness of the classroom, on your English papers that you submitted, on the team, whether it was track or cross country. His whole thing was recruiting. If you could walk and stand up, he had you out for track. Not so much cross country, but track. So at our school, it was a big deal. And we would often take 2 full bus loads to track meets. And people would see our team and they'd just be flabbergasted like this. It wasn't an incredibly small school. We had about 2,500 kids, but we had well over 250 people out for track at any one time. So
now, what about women's sports there, track and the other sports? Well, that time of year, things were really getting, and certainly California's ahead of the curve on some of this.
Right. It was just starting. In fact, my freshman year, we had a transfer, a girl by the name of Pam Allen, who was one of the very early distance runners. In fact, she made it to the California State meet. And I know the 2 mile, I'm not sure the mile, but she made it 3 or 4 years. And she ran, I can remember because my mile as a freshman was 5:08 and hers was 5:02. So I had a sophomore girl that had best my time that year. And sadly, her dad got a job further north in California and she moved. So we only had her the 1 year, but I kept track of her. But that was the beginning of girls breaking into sports. And it went pretty quick at our high school because mainly because our coach was recruiting real heavy. So again, if a girl could walk and stand, he didn't really care about your ability because he knew he could develop you over time. And
Let me ask you about some of your personal situation. Certainly now with college costs the way it is, I'm always encouraging kids to say, hey, go to junior college and figure the
yeah,
rest of the stuff out there. How'd you pick a college, go where you went, and adjust to PR national record to being a freshman again?
yeah. In high school, at one point, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I had qualified to become an ROTC in the Air Force, and I had a dorm room in Oregon State University. They had accepted,
Corvallis?
yeah, in Corvallis. And all I had to do was go to Letterman Hospital in San Francisco and pass a physical. I thought, well, this is going to be easy. At the end of my junior year, and I'm as fit as a fiddle, and my teeth are perfect, my eyes are perfect, my ears are perfect. I've got almost straight A's. I think I had one B plus in high school. I thought, oh, this physical's the easy part. Very long story short, they found a heart murmur. And in those days, I found out later, 25 years later or so, that many endurance runners were misdiagnosed with heart murmurs. In fact, they told me, the doctor, the Army doctor, Letterman, told me I should stop immediately. I should stop running because I could drop dead with this heart murmur. And I told him, I said, and of course, this is how long it was. He was smoking a cigarette behind the desk while he's telling me. That's how it was in 76. And so I said, doctor, I believe I know my body. I said, it seems to me if something was wrong, I could feel it. I said, you just put me on the treadmill this morning. You said you've never seen that treadmill go that fast, and you've never seen that treadmill on that incline for that long. And I said, so I didn't drop dead. I said, nope. He said, you can enlist, but we're not going to give you the scholarship. And the day before, he said, if it's trivial, the murmur will give you the scholarship. So anyhow, I nixed that, decided to stay home and go to the local junior college, who happened to have a whole bunch of really good high school runners going there that year. It was a fabulous experience. But that's how I went from being accepted to a bunch of schools and trying to get to Oregon because that was the haven for distance running, to all of a sudden now I'm actually just in Sacramento at a great program. So I stumbled into a great thing backwards, but it was a very good thing for me because I was able to develop slower, I would say, and more methodically with a very intelligent coach. And if I would have gone straight into a 4U system, I'm not sure I would have, if I could very well have blown up.
You've got a great perspective on it now, but how long did it take to get over that?
Not long. I was resentful right out of the bat because I had a full ride scholarship and I knew nothing was wrong with me. I did have it checked. This is a funny story. I was in my late 30s and I happened to be in an airport and I saw a Runner's World at the terminal. I picked up the Runner's World and on the front cover it said, misdiagnosis of heart murmurs, common. On the front cover of Runner's World. I opened it up and I read the article and it was me. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. So then fast forward till I was about 51 or 52. And as part of my contract to be a superintendent, I had to get an annual physical. So I told the doctor who was giving me an annual physical of this thing that happened to me and my experience in this news article I had read. And he said, well, tell you what, come in because now we have the technology. You'll be wide awake and we can scope your heart and everything will be good. And we'll tell you exactly what's going on. About a week later, I went in and I did have one valve that leaked a little bit. I have a tricuspid valve instead of a bicuspid valve. When the flap comes back, it doesn't close completely off. So I have a little bit of backflow on one valve. But all that said, I said, doctor, do I need to worry? He goes, no. He goes, you're in great shape. Your physical specimen. He said, that's just, no, you have nothing to worry about. So that was that story.
Yeah, it's interesting because I got a diagnosis like that, and I had to take antibiotics when I went and had my teeth cleaned because they're worried the bacteria. That's really a heart murmur risk, is really a risk in your teeth. And it's
Yeah.
good to find out that's healthy. Good for you. All right. How did you adjust? We'll talk about your career, and moving to ultras seemed natural to you. You did everything there was to do in running, from the
Right.
4x4 to ultra marathon. But how did you adjust when you were not number one then? How was that handling your career as you went? As you said, you dropped your final year of eligibility, but how were you maturing, changing as a person then to look at competition? That's still a young age.
Yeah, for me, and I still believe this today, there's always someone faster. If there's not someone faster than you, you're not in a big enough duck pond. So I always surrounded myself with high quality athletes. So I was always generally a mid packer. Did I win a few races now and then? Of course. But to me, particularly in cross country, it was about teamwork and working together and helping each other get through a race. And also, like now in single track meets, not cross country, while it's individual, the person I compete against is the person I see in the mirror. That's my biggest competition, is the person I see in the mirror.
And certainly, I will get into some details of what Masters track is, but it is 100% supportive, and almost everybody out on the track there is that exact attitude.
Yep. Yeah. It's really enjoyable and refreshing. I think another thing that's changed for the good, I believe, is this distinction of amateur and professional. Sadly, when we were growing up, some people could have, in today's world, continued to run. But in those days, you couldn't even get a free pair of shoes without being labeled professional and get kicked out of the sport. So not only did you have to go to school, you'd have to make a living, plus train. And then the best runners in those days, Shorter, Rogers, Prefontaine, they all had to somehow scrape by and live by whatever means they could while they were training. Where today, I've just read recently, where even some of the top high schoolers are getting NIL contracts, name, image, and was it likeness contracts?
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe there's something bad for that. I don't know. But at least now there's an avenue for people to run longer in life and continue it.
Yeah, I like that. Gary Martin is one young guy I'm following. He was a Pennsylvania 4-minute high school miler. He got an NIL and a full contract with New Balance. And one other aspect of it, when he was figuring it out, he said, what about the community service? What good are we going to do with this relationship? So it's a whole new world. And some of the great young people who are taking advantage of this are really looking to make an impact along with the career.
Yeah. So it's good for the sport. One thing I did learn shortly after graduating from college, my wife and I backpacked around Europe for about 4 months. And I was super fit then. I was running 105-mile weeks all the time. And I got hooked into the English club system a little bit. And I always thought, looking back, that the Brits had really had it figured out, because you didn't see that drop off after college where all of a sudden these athletes all disappear. The English club system, they stayed often running beyond school. And you don't see that same kind of club system here. There are big clubs and there are supportive clubs, particularly in the Masters, but there's that drop off of participation because there's really nowhere to go other than road racing.
Yeah. I don't know if you've read the book Purple Runner. It's a novel. I talked to Paul, the writer of it, Paul, in here, but it's fun. I think you'd enjoy it. It's got some hints of who are these people? Who's he really talking about? It's set in London with some Kiwis in it, and with the club system showing this is what's going on. And you had some advantages, some disadvantages, some misdiagnosis there. What happened to you after you finally finished college? You finished running around Europe. What then went on for your running career after you were doing the ultras? When did it tail off for you?
To be clear, my 20s, 30s, 40s, I competed without ever stopping. Where it tailed off completely is in my 50s. By then, I was in upper management, working long hours. Frankly, as you said earlier, I had done it all at that point. In fact, ironically, for a sport I'd loved and had so much passion for, if you had asked me who was in the Olympics in that 10-year period, I couldn't even have told you. I couldn't even told you who the best American runner was. So I completely got away from it. And of course, I mean, I had a different passion then. I was trying to become the best guitar player and the best guitar builder I could be. So I think there's a little bit of OCD, obsessive compulsive in me, because whenever I take something on, I just dive in head over heels and try to be the very best I can be at whatever that thing is. So for those 10 years, it wasn't running, it was guitar.
Yeah. Okay. Something happened and you got back into it with that same focus, passion, and obsessiveness. And it's been fun to watch. Found you online, and I ran a master steeplechase when I was in my 60s. And so that keyed me. And then it's been a great progression. You have again applied yourself at all levels, and it's a whole new world, from Pilates to water aerobics to all these new technologies and approaches. What changed in that at the end of that 10 years for you?
Really simply, a very good friend of mine, Michael LeBold, who was also a steeplechaser at UC Santa Barbara, much better athlete than I. He called me one day right after I turned 60 and said, Brent, we need one more guy for our 16 over cross country team. And I said, Mike, I'm out of shape. And he said, Brent, all you have to do is come run an 8K cross country. And I said, I know I can finish 8K and I know I can run that far, but I can't guarantee you any kind of result. But I will finish. I will finish that race. I flew down to San Diego to be the third man on their team, the Hummel Toads. And while I wasn't last place, I could turn around and see two guys behind me in the 40 and over. I was 60, but it was a 40 and over. And there's about 250 guys in the race. And like I said, two guys were behind me. Now that by itself didn't motivate me. But another very good runner that I ran with in college, Chris Hughes, happened to be taking a video of me in the last mile, okay? And he was commentating while he was videotaping me on his cell phone as if I was winning the race. Yeah, he was a joker. And he showed me that video after. I cannot tell you how ashamed I was of myself. I saw a chubby, out of shape person shuffling along in the worst form. I don't know that I even call it running. The little segment he videoed, there was a little bitty bump. It was a hill that was maybe 15 yards long, real steep, but then 15 yards, and then you came off the other side. In fact, it was a man-made hill. You could see I was going really slow, and I hit that hill, and I even slowed down more. Anyhow, after that video, he showed me that. I turned the cell phone back towards him so he could see the video, and I pointed at it. I said, Chris, mark my words. I am coming back, and I am coming back with a vengeance, because I am ashamed. I am ashamed of what I've become. So what was interesting was, in my head, I still saw myself as athletic. But when I saw that video, I went, oh my, Brent, you are nothing even close to athletic. You're sad. You're in very sad shape. That was 5 years ago, almost to the day. And it started off with, the first year was just a ram walk, a 10-mile loop every other day is all I did. And then I added a personal trainer. I added Pilates about 4 months ago. I moved to altitude here in Flagstaff a year and a half ago. I'm training harder now than I've ever trained, by far.
And certainly traveling more to run.
Yes.
You may have filled up your passport. The Masters is booming. We lost the 2020 world championship that was going to be in Toronto, and it didn't happen because of COVID at all. But it's been, where have you been in the last 5 years? A laundry list of where you competed, countries.
Sweden for Worlds, ran a steeplechase there. Norway for 5K. Canada, your Canadian Championships this last year was in Laval, the suburb of Montreal. Beautiful track and location. And then the year before I was in British Columbia in Langley. Beautiful. If you ever get a chance to go to Langley, suburb of British Columbia, beautiful facility. Ran a steeplechase there. Was in Montenegro, the old Yugoslavia, last September. That one was interesting because the barriers were rusted in all different angles. And so, yeah, some of them were rusted with 36 inches, whereas 30 inches is for masters. But because these were rusted in different heights, and depending on where you were in the race and where the other competitors were, sometimes you had to swing out to different locations on the barrier. So that one was interesting. I'm glad I went. It was fun.
That's great.
That different kind of challenge. Where else? Other countries?
You went to Australia. I was curious about how far ahead you went there to adjust. I've traveled a lot, and the time zone change can affect different people in different ways. How far ahead, and how'd you adjust to that?
That one, I flew out so that I had 4 days rest before. And that one, for some reason, I think because it goes across the date line, and so you flip back closer to your time zone, that one didn't impact me as badly as Gutenberg. Sweden really hurt me. Sweden, I was there 5 days early, and it wasn't enough. I didn't adjust till about 10 days out in Sweden. But next up, I'm actually going to Australia next month. And then in May, I'm going to Taiwan for the World Masters Games. Steeplechase there, too, so that'll be my second steeplechase. And then later in the year, in August or September, I'll be in Madeira, Portugal, for the European Masters Nationals. But it's so fun to compete against masters in other countries. It really is.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So just for some people, if they haven't been involved, one thing, I think the steeplechase barriers moved down at age 60. Right before that, they were still 36 or 32. But another thing is you could go, for example, to the Canadian Championships. You can win your medal, but there'll still be 3 Canadians win. So when you're a foreigner, you're welcome, you're counted, but you don't displace national winners from their ranking. But you'll be internationally, your time's counted, all these sanctioned events. And what about the other people that are in your event now? The M60 and steeplechase. How many people are doing this circuit of races as much as you are? Certainly, I've met people that are North America centric, and I'd see them just in those races. And there's the European group. There's a great steeplechaser. I don't know if you run into him, in South American guy that kicked my butt about 4 years ago.
Yeah, there's a couple good Spaniards. There's a good Ukrainian, a lot of good Australians. Not, I was going to say Brits, but they're good at the 800 and 1500. So to get what you were hinting at, the interesting thing about the steeplechase I've noticed is that there's quite a few from 60 to 64. At 65 and beyond, it really drops off. And I think it's partly because, in my opinion, we worry too much about the running aspect and not the strength aspect. You've got to be durable to handle the steeplechase. For example, 3 years ago when I first started running steeplechase again, I would run one and I could compete and do okay, but it felt like someone took a baseball bat to my body afterwards. Now, this last year, every one I ran, it was like nothing. Didn't bother me at all. So I know my body's adapting to the rigors of steeplechase. And I think we're in a different, interesting time because we're pioneers for masters runners. Before us, well, there were a few older people, seniors that ran. Now there's a big group, and we're all learning how to best prepare ourselves for competition. And
yeah, you mentioned Pilates is a big part now, and some of these things Had you done what had you done by the time you finished your first phase of your career up to the 50s in terms of stretching therapies and alternate stuff?
Yeah, very little, honestly. A little bit of gym work, but not much. I did a lot of push-ups. I've done pull-ups my whole life. Stretching, yes. We didn't understand the concept of mobility. We understood flexibility, but we didn't understand the concept of mobility. We didn't do massage therapy. We didn't do PT. Of course, when you're in your teens and 20s and even 30s, the injury bug just doesn't bite you. But when you say 55 and beyond, you better start thinking about maintaining your muscle mass, and you better start thinking about recovery. I never thought much about recovery. Now I actually plan for recovery. I plan when I'm going to take a nap. I plan how I'm going to help my legs recover, whether it be the Normatec boots or the Theragun percussion gun instrument, or getting an occasional massage. Like I always get massages right leading into competition, the day before and 2 days before, always. And I do deep tissue massage, which some coaches would say don't do that. But what I've learned is from a couple, 2 or 3 different massage therapists, people respond differently from deep tissue massage. Some people can get it and feel good the next day, and some people can get deep tissue massage and be sore the next day and not be able to compete. I'm the former, so I can get it. In fact, I sometimes get a massage the morning of my competition. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely against the consensus approach.
Yeah. No, my coach for SoCal Track Club, Mark Cleary, he actually was scolding me. Brent, do not get a deep tissue massage. Of course, I already knew by then my body. And so I just said, okay, coach, and then went ahead and did it. But now he knows that it works for me. You got to do what works for you.
Okay, I'll ask you some things. You're having great success now, and you've become well known among the group that's doing these races and the events. Have you pursued getting sponsorship? And what's the level of sponsorship for Masters athletes? Have any companies gotten in on this?
It's funny you bring that up because I think there's a opportunity there. In fact, you have a Canadian woman I know, was Carla. Yes, who's Starbucks sponsored. And there's an American, Sue McDonald, who's sponsored by 2 or 3 companies. I think there's an opportunity there. I'm maybe just at the point where I'll try to seek that out. I don't have any aspirations that would fully fund anything, but if you could get free shoes out of it or discounted travel or something, would be well worth it. And I have nothing to lose, so why not? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The one other thing, really, my career crashed when I was 19. I came back, did a little bit, but it was a thrill for me to compete for Canada. I had to buy an official national costume. And that's another thing in Masters that people can do. It's open to anybody. There aren't many times you can't compete, but you can compete for the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, and your Canadian team, I have a lot of Canadian friends having competed in Toronto and British Columbia and Montreal. So I have a great deal of respect for the Canadian teams. And at the end of the day, we're all the same when we hit the track or the roads or the cross country. I will tell you that maybe one of the biggest sporting experiences was when I was in Gutenberg last August for the Worlds. It was just incredible, that opening ceremony. Yeah, it's anytime you can compete internationally, to me, it's so rewarding.
I think your times have dropped as you've aged a couple years. You've managed to get it down, and that can't go on forever. You
Right.
can train, but we're getting older. Do you have a horizon for this? You just riding it? What do you see? What do you expect to be able to hold
Sure.
out, and how are you going to deal with that?
Sure. The progression's been 922 3 years ago to 911 to 903 last year. And I'm absolutely confident I'll be under 9 this year as a 66-year-old. I turned 66 in July, late July. And I believe that because the Pilates has added a component that I didn't realize you could regain, meaning your mobility and your strength in your hips. And Pilates is custom built for it. It is custom built for steeplechase. Before that, I was doing gym work, but you just can't replicate what you can do on reformer Pilates.
They're probably going to turn you into a pole vaulter one day.
And
It's core. It's all core at this age.
Yeah, funny you say that, because a friend of mine say that, and I have great grip strength. I have great upper body, like I can do a lot of pull-ups, and my core has always been strong, but it's getting super strong with Pilates. And that's funny you bring that up, because at some point I think I will take up pole vaulting. I think I could do okay at it, you know.
Yeah, and you've seen some of the meets, even at provincial, state level, maybe some small national levels. Sometimes there's one person in each age group, and it's just what a fun. I hang out at the pole vault pit. I don't compete, but it's a great fun community and figuring out. I met one guy who never pole vaults all year. All he does is core work, and then he vaults.
Oh, wow. Yeah. At the end of the day, I have a recent theory. It's not any mind-boggling theory, but I've changed to think, become an athlete first and then a runner. Where all growing up, it was run. How do you get faster at running? Run. How do you get fat? Run more, run faster, run hills, run interval. Running's still important, but that's the end game. You got to have a foundation called being an athlete. Because if you're not overall athletic, then who cares that you can go out and run every day? Or who cares that you can go run 6 miles, but you can't run very fast because you're shuffling, because your hips are so stiff, your stride length so short. And frankly, if you're overall athletic, you're going to be healthier and not bound up. I think a lot of my people I see that are distance runners and masters, they're just super stiff and immobile. And if there's one thing I could gift them for advice, is work on your mobility first and foremost. Mobility, so that you have full range of motion across your joints. Because that's what causes stiffness and achiness, and that's what causes soreness, that's what causes injury. If your mobility is 100%, I don't think you're ever going to get injured. Yeah. But it's poor mobility. It's sitting all day. It's bad posture. It's our lifestyle hurts our mobility.
Yeah, we just have to accept that and add these things in and get therapies and figure out the budget of your finances and your time to, have a long life. You're really inspirational, Brent, and I encourage everybody to at least, I don't know if you need another 1,000 friends, but to follow your journey on Facebook. It's great to see what you're up to, and you're very positive about this. I want to ask you, did your fandom for the world of running come back when you re-entered?
Yes, in fact, maybe more. I think there's a great deal of respect, and it's humbling for those that were superb collegiate athletes and open athletes that I once knew and competed against, who can no longer go. And as much as they would like to go, they can't go for any number of reasons. Debilitating injuries or diseases, and sadly, some not even with us anymore. And they tell me often, you're running for us. You're running for us. We can't, but we follow you. You're running for us. And so it's really humbling. Yeah.
You're generous with your time, your advice, very thoughtful about this. Have you done speaking to masters groups, to kids about your life? I find it inspirational the whole way through, and the ups and the downs and the comeback. There's a lot of great stuff I enjoy from afar, getting to know you. Is that something you're going to do?
If someone were to ask, yes, I do it in probably one-on-one situations more. Other masters wanting to get back in and starting to get back in. Younger, when I say younger kids, they could be in their 30s or 40s, but I can't tell you how often I'm at the gym and I'll have a younger guy come up to me and go, "Oh my God, can I ask you how old you are?" And it makes me proud. And then they ask me, "How did you manage to keep doing what you're doing at your age?" And I told them, actually, it's really not brain surgery. It's be consistent. And it's okay to take time off. I don't advise it, but be consistent over your lifetime and know that motion is lotion. So as long as you keep moving, you're going to be okay. It's when you stop moving that you fall apart. But to get to in my career, I did much public speaking. And so, yeah, if that opportunity ever availed itself, I would not turn it down because it's a story I think that can help others. And maybe I can keep others from having to be shell shocked with the moment that I had, looking at yourself in the mirror and going, oh boy, did I let myself go. Yeah. Or I tell 50-year-old plus men, do not let your muscles atrophy. Keep your muscles. Keep them. Somehow keep them.
Yeah, certainly one thing in masters, there's this thing about age 50 where there's a Rubicon there. Kids have grown, career established. You can either settle around in the backyard and just barbecue, or say, I've met a lot of police and guys that are just like, I used to throw the shot put, I'm going to come out. So sometimes 50 to 55 is this crazy competitive group with all these new guys with enthusiasm. And that your message is great there.
Yeah. It'd be nice to continue to build our sport. And I've met so many wonderful people in the Masters competitions, really inspiring stories. People, many actually, ironically, never were athletic their whole life. And for whatever reason, decided at 50 to take it up and become extraordinarily good athletes late in life. To me, those stories are just incredible.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about Carla DeGrand. I hope people look her up. She didn't start running till well after that. And she's a many overtime world record holder.
Yeah. No, I've had short conversations with her and enjoy talking to her. She's an inspiration. For sure.
I'm going to just encourage people who are fans of running and the sport to not neglect what's going on in Masters. There's some spectacular times, just as we have high school kids, sometimes 20 of them in a month, breaking records, running under 4-minute mile. We've got Masters who are breaking barriers and personal barriers, improving your time. 18 seconds from 60 to 64. Congratulations, Brent. It's a great story you've got going on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed another episode. Do you have someone you'd like to hear interviewed on the podcast? You can leave a comment on the YouTube channel or on the website, running70s.com. That's running70s.com. Let me know what you think of the episodes and anyone, including yourself, you'd like to hear interviewed. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.